Okay, everyone. Today is one of my favorite days when it comes to talking about leadership. But first, just to recap, the prior day we focused on expectation setting. I didn't discuss what it meant to define expectations, as we'll cover that in the next week. We focused on the importance of setting expectations, what it means to consistently set expectations, ways in which to communicate the expectations, and how expectations help to set the direction and the alignment, and why that's important to do consistently to always make sure that we are driving ourselves and our teams to the priority items we need to focus on. But today, we are going to build from expectation setting and talk about something called being direct and being empathetic. I think some people see this conversation as two things being at odds with one another. And what I'm here to tell you today is that that is not the case. So empathy often gets confused with kindness or being nice or being like a pushover. And direct often gets confused with being not an ideal person, or maybe being, for lack of a better term, an a-hole. But I'm here to say that direct and empathy, both of them separately and together, are neither of those things. You can be understanding and being an a-hole, and you can be direct and also be nice. So all these things are not mutually exclusive. So why is this important today? And let's go back to the MAP formula. What's our motivation to get this mix of directness and empathy right? It really helps to demonstrate our ability to be that kind of respected transformational leader. Most of us want to be seen as that, and there are certain benefits of being seen as that in terms of our performance and really inspiring those around us. And it's really interesting that when we combine these two things of being direct and empathetic, that we can earn our team and others' respect, even when we're being critical. And at the end of the day, like this combination of being direct and empathetic enables us to hold ourselves accountable in a way that we don't end up regretting things either, and not saying something that we needed to say, or saying something that we needed to say in a way that we weren't too happy about, and that caused some kind of reaction either with someone else or with ourselves that ultimately impacts our time quality. Remember, time quantity, time quality, and those are two different things that we can utilize to drive our execution, which we will talk about in a couple of weeks. So covering a little bit of the motivation, why it's important that we should focus on direct and empathy, but let's focus on the accessibility piece now, and just making these concepts even easier. So some people confuse being direct with kind of speaking your mind. That's, I guess you could be direct, like that's some form of being direct, but that's not always the best thing. Like perhaps speaking your mind isn't always a good thing. You can express something in an accusatory way, and that in turn can hurt time quality, ultimately productivity, and that doesn't benefit you, the person, the organization, performance, and your own goals. But I like to think about being direct as telling someone something that they need to hear that will help them. So it's not about helping myself, to share my feelings on something, to have that kind of consultative psychological effect of getting something off my chest. That's not what I see directness being about. Like, how can you tell someone something that they need to hear that helps them? So for example, in a professional setting, letting somebody know that they're not meeting expectations. And when they don't meet expectations, that can impact their job performance, their income, their employment, and all the things that they connect to that. So sometimes it might be hard to tell someone something that they need to hear, but you're actually demonstrating an act of kindness by not withholding information that can have this huge material impact on their profession and also their life. And one of the most important things about being direct is backing it in data and giving examples. So quantifying it. If you're saying to someone that they have an area for development, it can't come off as, us feeling that that's a thing. Like, how are you backing that decision? Like, did you actually use quantifiable data and see examples or get reported, have examples shared with you that enabled you to create that opinion? So if I'm being direct with someone and letting them know that there's a performance improvement requirement, I'm going to make sure to quantify things. So to say, I've seen 3 occurrences where X, Y, and Z has happened. I know we previously talked about this situation one time and we were aiming for X improvement, but unfortunately, it seems like we're not getting there. And that then dovetails into the next part of this conversation, which is empathy. And as I said earlier, empathy is not about it's not about being nice. Okay, it's not necessarily about feeling what someone else feels. I think sometimes empathy gets really confused with sympathy. Sympathy means you feel something that someone else feels. It doesn't necessarily mean that you understand what they feel, and that's what empathy is. And if you sometimes say you're feeling something that someone else feels and you haven't been through that situation, how could you possibly feel that unless you're you have some kind of sixth sense? So you need to be careful and understand the differences between sympathy and empathy. But empathy is not about being nice. It's seeking to understand the cause, like the reasons why, and understanding someone's world and their context. And that isn't an excuse for undesired behavior, or maybe is not something to grab onto for desired behavior. But the simple act of giving somebody the opportunity to help you to understand something creates a connection with somebody, which ultimately builds a relationship. And we'll talk about how that helps through identifying obstacles a little later on in this week of the program. And in terms of motivation and accessibility, just simply the act of seeking to understand someone and the cause behind something increases motivation, not only for ourselves, but the person that you're seeking to understand. And ultimately, empathy and seeking to understand allows us to gather more information to better understand the person, and then to help to advise and consult, which we will talk about on another day this week. So at the end of the day, it's not a competition. It's not speaking what's on your mind versus being nice. It's about giving someone information that can help them and that you've backed rationally, and delivering it in a way that seeks to understand why that information might be. And then ultimately, this information helps us to help others through advising and consulting to overcome obstacles. So seek to understand the problem and stating the problem, back that in data and examples. We're always asking to understand, restate the expectations. So let's say that you're in a situation with somebody and you're having a performance issue. Telling them that you don't seem to be hitting X milestone by the agreed upon date. Would you agree that you've not been able to do that? And usually somebody will disagree or will usually agree. In some cases, they will disagree. And we can ask them, why do you think this is happening? What's going on in your situation or within your role that's making things harder or that's making things more difficult? So in this process, I'm seeking to understand what is causing the not meeting the expectation, the thing that I was direct about. And then by understanding and making that effort and hearing back what's going on with the person, simple act of listening will motivate them more and also will inform me with information on how I can help them to create an ideal outcome, either through advising and consulting and ultimately understanding the obstacles that the person is facing. And even when I make the effort to understand and I genuinely do understand, that does not excuse a behavior that's undesirable or a result that's undesirable. And it's okay to restate that with the person. Like I might say something like, I understand what's happening in your family. And after we've talked, there's two approaches that we're considering to take to help give you more of what you need in the office to be successful. And the expectation will still remain the same, that you need to hit these milestones. So you see how I would still remain direct, and what I was being direct about materially impacts the person. It's something that they need to hear. And I made the effort to understand what was going on. And then I did one further step, which is advising and consulting, and also to understand the obstacles, which we'll cover later on, all through a practice of empathy and understanding. And then I came back to the expectation, the directness, the thing that they need to hear, that material impact, that has a material impact on them. All right, so action items. Again, we've got another form, quick, easy, just takes you through some practice in terms of understanding a time maybe when you needed to be direct or you need to be direct, and how you seek to understand what's going on behind that, and then to implement that in your daily professional life. So that covers directness and empathy, not directness versus empathy. And tomorrow we will go further into empowering our teams.